Good morning. You know, in World War II, Japan used a very famous propagandist by the name of Tokyo Rose to discourage American troops. And the way Tokyo Rose discouraged American troops was to report bad news. And some of that bad news had really happened. Some of it had not really happened, but you know, whether the bad news is real or it's imagined, if you're thinking negatively, it's gonna hurt you. It's gonna take your morale away. It's like in a football game. You can almost see the wind go out of a team when it is mentally defeated. If a team can keep its spirits up, it can win under the most adverse of circumstances. But once a basketball team or a baseball team or a football team believes it's in such trouble that there's no hope of winning, that team is through. That team is through. And I think it's extremely important for those of us in the church to be realistic in the sense that we do not think we are perfect. We do not think we live in congregations that are perfect. We have problems. There's no question about it. But do you know something? As I read about the religious world, I see that we're not the only religious group in any sense of the word that is struggling to understand why certain things are happening. You look at the Baptists, the Presbyterians, you look at the Methodists, you look at the Catholics, you just look all over the religious world and people are scratching their heads about some of the things that are going on. Well, that is certainly true of us, and we don't deny that, but I would plead for us not to think that the sky is falling. I do not believe the sky is falling. I do believe that the church belongs to Jesus Christ, and I believe as long as it belongs to Him, and I belong to Him, He's going to take care of me and the church. And I think that's just something very, very important for us to remember. Now, what I've tried to do in my part of this presentation is to list 14 things that I would call unexpected good news from the mission field. I mentioned 7 of those in the first session, and I want to hurriedly mention 7 of those in this session. Really good things that are happening in churches of Christ. Number 1, actually this is number 8. This is number 8 because I gave the first 7 in the previous session. Number 8, there is good news about medical mission work. I don't know of very many things in churches of Christ more encouraging than what is going on in the field of medicine, in the field of medical missions. Every January here in let's see, where am I right now? It's not here. It's in the DFW area. Every January in the DFW area, there is a gigantic meeting of health care givers from churches of Christ. Various organizations that are designed to provide medical care. There are doctors, nurses, physician assistants, pharmacists, people who do the evangelistic work on medical mission trips. Every year in January, they gather on a weekend in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. I've been there numerous times. It is one of the most uplifting, encouraging experiences that I have. Those people lay aside whatever differences they might have about even how to practice medicine. They come together and they talk about how they can help people and how they can get the gospel out to people as they provide medical care. I want to encourage you, if you have never been to one of those seminars to go. There are hundreds of people that gather there. And I'm telling you, there are people there all the way from the neurosurgeons to the person who just goes to run errands. They're all there to talk about medical missions. I was there a few years ago, and a very well-known thoracic surgeon from the state of Texas was encouraging his fellow medical people to get involved in medical missions. And he said something that was just so memorable that it stuck in my mind. He was an older man, and he said, look, he said, don't tell me you can't practice medicine on the mission field because you don't have your computers and you don't have all of your technology. He said, go to your office, find your stethoscope, dust it off, try to figure out which end goes in your ears, and practice medicine. He said, if you'll practice the medicine you know with a stethoscope, you can perform what the people feel like is a miracle on their health. That's the spirit of that meeting. And I think that's one of the great untold stories of what is happening today among churches of Christ. A ninth point is that there is good news about World Bible School. I just wonder how many people here are doing work connected to World Bible School. Would you raise your hand if you are? Here are several over here. I don't know of any place where you can do mission work and get more for your dollar than through World Bible School. World Bible School makes this statement that $1 lets one soul study the Bible. $1 lets one soul study the Bible. I'm on the board of World Bible School, and I say that humbly, and I haven't been on it very long. But it is amazing what is happening in World Bible School. Thousands and thousands of young people, high school age, in Africa have signed up to study in World Bible School. World Bible School has over 2 million people studying in its program. An estimated 26,000 people a year request baptism. Now you think about that. Not all these people probably are baptized because some of them are far, far away. But I know enough about the way the Lord works to know that there are people who find people to baptize them. But think of 26,000 people requesting baptism because somebody here in the United States, or bodies in the United States, have been studying by correspondence. World Bible School is in the process of launching a strong effort to reach out to the United States through studies on the Internet. And so far, the results are most encouraging. Research has shown that when we do something on the Internet with World Bible School, the response from the United States is absolutely overwhelming. There are things that can be done by Internet today that open up avenues for evangelism and edification that we didn't have just a few years ago. Number 10, there's good news about child care on the mission field. A few years ago, I read a statistic that seems just so astounding, but the statistic was that Brazil had 9 million children that were either abandoned or were orphans or were neglected. That's a lot of children. But if that's true in Brazil, I promise you, if you look around the world, there are millions and millions and millions of children needing attention, needing help. And there is a growth in churches of Christ in trying to provide help for children. There's one orphanage already functioning in Brazil. There's another orphanage that is either has just begun or is about to begin up in Recife. And I was talking to Monty Cox the other day, and he told me that there are at least 12 children's homes in Africa. Well, I don't know how many children's homes there are all over the world that Churches of Christ are involved in outside the United States. But I do know this, that that's an important work, and it takes money to operate those homes. And for those of us who are affluent and who have money, we can help just by providing the encouragement that those people need who are trying to help children. Number 11, there is good news, I believe, about brotherhood support for missions. I get mad sometimes when I hear people criticize the Lord's church. I get mad when I hear people talk about how awful the churches are in their support of missionaries. You know, I know that we can find missionaries who have been mistreated on the mission field, but I was there for 16 years, and, you know, I didn't lose a pound while I was there. We were taken care of. We were provided with money to educate our children, to go back and forth to the United States to see our families, to have the working funds that we needed to do radio work, to do printing work. The church took care of our mission team. And I'm impressed with the way Churches of Christ take care of their missionaries. I'm going to tell you what the story is if you talk to missionaries who have good sense, and there's some that don't, but there are some that do. But you talk to missionaries who have contacts with missionaries in other religious groups, and we are the envy of those other groups. Once in a while we'll have somebody say, boy, you know, a missionary society might not be too bad. Well, you talk to some of the people who are in missionary societies, missionaries who are being overseen by missionary societies, and see what they tell you. They would much rather have our support situation. I'm proud of the Churches of Christ right now because they're doing so well with their budgets. Now, I haven't done any kind of a scientific look at all the churches in the Brotherhood, but the college church is way ahead this year on its budget. And if we'll quit talking about how bad the times are and be generous, there won't be any of us behind on our budget at the end of this fiscal year. What happens when churches start singing the Depression blues, they start saying, I can't give as much as I used to give. Well, why can't you give as much as you used to give? Are you still eating as much as you used to eat? Are you still buying clothes like you used to buy clothes? Are you still going on vacations like you used to go on vacations? Why can't we be generous in a time when maybe there's not as much money out there as there used to be? I'm proud of the fact that Churches of Christ, I believe, continue to do a very good job of being generous in their support of missions. Number 12, good news from the mission field is the great work that single women are doing on the mission field. That's one of the bright spots in missions today, is what single women are doing on the mission field. Now here's what some people don't know. In the history of missions in Churches of Christ, some of the best missions that have ever been done were done by women. And we've got quite a number of single women on the mission field today who are doing a great job. They compare favorably, I believe, with Sarah Andrews in Japan and Elizabeth Bernard in Hong Kong and Irene Johnson Gatewood in Germany a number of years back. But some of those women working on the mission field today are Ellen Walker in Albania, Sujin Nelson in Thailand, Eileen Inch in Russia, Stephanie Bryant in Singapore. Gordon Hogan tells me that she is the only missionary in that part of the world, in Singapore, who speaks Mandarin Chinese. And she speaks it fluently. And I'm happy to say she was one of my students, but I must confess she didn't learn Mandarin Chinese from me. We have a young lady named Snezhana Lepke who's getting ready to go to China. I just met a young lady here a few minutes ago who is getting ready to go to China. Tell me her name. Where is she? Jennifer Marshall. Do you know her, David? She is your daughter, right? And she's getting ready to go to China. Louisa Gaines is in Zambia. Joyce Bingham spends a lot of time in Africa. Listen, folks, let me tell you something. When a young woman comes to talk to your missions committee or your elders, don't rule them out because they are women. Women today are more willing to go to the mission field many times than the men are. And they are doing a good job. Number 13. There is good news about missionary care for missionaries. Oh, there's been a major change in that area. And who pioneered that in our brotherhood was Dr. Clyde Austin of Abilene Christian. He pioneered the idea that we in Churches of Christ need to take care of our wounded soldiers. And that when people are on the mission field and they have marital problems or they have mental problems or emotional problems, or maybe this has happened where maybe there would be a missionary who was raped and in the past there was nobody there to help that person. Now we have a team of professionals who stand ready almost at a moment's notice to help missionaries who need special attention, who have been wounded on the mission field. That is a major advance. Continent of Great Cities has led out in this, along with Clyde Austin, and probably the group right now that is doing the most in this area is Missions Resource Network. There is a blue ribbon group of healthcare workers ready to help your missionaries if they get in trouble. And I thank God for that. The last thing that I want to mention is something that I think is good. And it is simply what God is doing through immigration and foreign students coming to the United States. Now, there are two ways to look at the immigration situation in the United States. One is to focus on the problem of illegal aliens. The other is to focus on how we can reach these people with the gospel, whether legal or illegal. And I am thrilled to death that God, in His wisdom, has made this country the country where so many people in the world are willing to stand in line for hours and days to get a visa in order to come in. And where others will swim rivers and climb fences to get in. I want to be in that kind of a country, don't you? I don't want to be in a country where you're having to hold guns on your people to keep them from fleeing. We're in a country where people want to come here. Now, when they come, what do we do with the gospel? What do we do about it? Well, I asked Martha Hodges, who is my assistant, to help me out on this. I just want to read some things that I think are interesting. Abilene Christian has 200 non-U.S. citizens on their campus from 50 nations. Harding has 230 non-citizens from 52 nations. Oklahoma Christian has 107 non-American citizens from 29 nations. The University of Central Oklahoma has 952 non-citizens from 94 nations. Oklahoma State University at Stillwater has 1,613 non-American citizens from 108 nations. The University of Oklahoma has 619 non-American citizens from 106 nations. And I believe this next statistic is Oklahoma City University. 756 non-American citizens from 49 different nations. Now, folks, that's here in the Oklahoma City area. That is a group of foreigners, every one of these legal, who has moved in to our community. Is that good news or not? I say that's good news. I think in the wisdom of God, He has brought the world to our doorstep. May we have our eyes open and our hearts open to take advantage of those opportunities. Thank you.
Good morning again. For those who were not with us in the 10 o'clock session, and as a reminder for those who were, the material that I'm presenting in these two class sessions, there's a lot more of it you can get in a booklet, Good News and Bad News, Realistic Assessment of Churches of Christ in the United States. Booklet is available at Yeoman Press, table out in the vestibule or the foyer or the lobby, whatever you call it. Howard, I was with a church the other day. They were so fancy they called that thing the foyer. I didn't know what to do. Okay, the good news, if we can, here we go. The good news is that most of the bad news we've been hearing isn't true. The bad news is that the good news is not as good as it ought to be. The material that I presented in the first session came primarily from research that I've been doing for the Christian Higher Education Foundation. The material I want to present in this session comes primarily from some work done by the Association of Statisticians of American Religious Bodies. The 2000 edition of the almanac that group produces, called Religious Congregations and Membership in the United States. Earlier versions were called Churches and Church Membership in the United States. The difference is that we're now trying to count Jewish synagogues, Muslim mosques, Buddhist temples, everything, any kind of U.S. congregation. And let me show you some good news here. Thought I'd already said that. Okay. Yeah, let me give you a biblical text for this. You remember in 1 Kings 19 when Elijah was so discouraged that he wanted to die because he thought he was the only one left? God told Elijah that there were 7,000 in Israel who had not bowed their knees to Baal, and that gave him the courage to go on. Well, I think a lot of people in churches of Christ have kind of an inferiority. Okay, here we are. Have sort of an inferiority complex about churches of Christ. They think this group is terribly small, rapidly declining, terribly divided. Most of the young people are leaving, and they're having serious doubts about their own participation in this fellowship in the future. Well, let me show you some things here. Christianity is by far the largest religion in the world. That's the good news. Bad news is that 70% of the people in the world don't even claim to be Christian. And most of those who are kind of identified as Christian, they're members in name only. I want you to know that while there are around 250 different Christian religious groups in America, over 90% of the members or adherents are in the 14 largest groups. These are the groups that have 1 million or more adherents. Churches of Christ are in that position with our instrumental brethren. These are the ones that have always been instrumental brethren. Christian churches, churches of Christ. And then the Christian church disciples of Christ. These are the three historical heirs of the Restoration movement. There are only 11 denominations that have more adherents than churches of Christ. But let me show you something about attendance in these denominations. You have the Catholic Church, the Mormons have never reported attendance statistics. And in the 2000 study, our instrumental brethren who usually report attendance figures did not. But I've plugged these in about where they would be. Most observers believe that on a given Sunday morning there are more people going to Baptist churches than there are going to Catholic churches. Although the Catholics claim 62 million adherents, and the Baptists claim only 20 million. The Mormons probably would be just a little under the United Methodist, but more than the ELCA, that Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. And the Christian churches, churches of Christ, their attendance is a little less than ours, but more than the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. So when you look at it in that way, there are about 7 of the largest religious groups in America that have more attendance than we do. But let's put that in perspective. One way to do that is to divide the number of people in attendance, the average attendance, divide that by the total number of adherents. When you do that, Churches of Christ had the list. On average, we have 76.4%. Our attendance equals 76.4% of all of the members and their children. The only other group that even comes close is the Assemblies of God at 63%. All the rest of them fall below 50%. Let me see, you get down here to the United Methodist, they're just barely at a third. The United Church of Christ, now don't get confused by that. That's a very liberal Protestant denomination. It's where Barack Obama went to church until his pastor became something of a political embarrassment. You remember all of that. Okay. United Church of Christ, the ELCA, under a third, and with the Southern Baptist Convention and the Christian Church, Disciples of Christ, it's just barely a fourth. Something unique about churches of Christ, our people actually come to church a good bit more than these other groups. Here we go. These are the religious groups with 1 million or more adherents, ranked by the number of congregations. And you'll see that Churches of Christ are number 4 on that list. The Southern Baptists have the most, then the Methodists, then the Catholics, and then us. Now, I put an asterisk out here because this is the 2009 figure. It's down by 398 since 2000. We've had about a 3.1% decline in the number of congregations listed in the directory Churches of Christ in the United States. 21 of those were congregations that, at least in regard to doctrine and practice, are much more like the Christian churches, Churches of Christ. You know, they use instrumental music, and the people who publish that directory have tried to explain that it has never been intended as a list that is identical to the Lamb's Book of Life. You know, these are all the good people. I mean, they list some that are weird. But what they do is they've always listed a cappella Churches of Christ. They include the 1 cup, the 1 loaf. You know, the 1 cupper is split into the crackers and snappers based on what you do with the loaf. And the way, you know, Mac Lynn, bless his heart, did years of research on this, and he always tried to list people the way they wanted to be listed. And there are about 2,000 that want to be identified as non-institutional Churches of Christ. And then there's some non-class. Don't call them no class. That's a put down. And they don't like to be called anti. You know, I grew up, the antis were the people that didn't believe in Sunday school. Then in the 50s, the antis were the people that didn't believe in church support of orphans' homes, things like that. Well, Mac tried to just count everybody that wanted to be counted among the a cappella Churches of Christ. Because, see, the Christian Church Disciples of Christ already had a really good directory. You know, they organized a denominational headquarters in Indianapolis, and they put out a very good directory already. And there are 2 directories for this fellowship of independent, conservative Christian churches that would not go along with the restructure, you know, the creation of a denominational organization. They're very similar to us in doctrine, very similar, except they use instrumental music and we don't. Well, when some of our congregations decided, yeah, we're going to, you know, that's the group that would logically report them. But the point is that these 21 churches that were listed before and not listed in the 2009 edition, it wasn't an effort to say that those people can't go to heaven. I think the Christian Chronicle interviewed me last year, and they said, do you regard these instrumental people as brethren? And I said, yeah, I always have. They were baptized same way I was. And and the reporter said, do you regard them as erring brethren? And I said, look it up. The word is pronounced erring. But yes, I regard them as erring brethren. But that's the only kind of brethren I have. I mean, that's us. That's the human condition. Well, when you talk about congregations, it's only the 3 biggest denominations in America that have more congregations than we do. Now, let's look at how dispersed we are. Back in the 2000 census, there were just a little over 3,000 counties in the United States. The Methodists had congregations in a little over 3,000. The Catholics, almost 3,000. The Southern Baptists, 2,600. Assemblies of God, about at that level. Churches of Christ, we were in 2,429 counties. But you would expect the Methodists, the Catholics, and the Baptists, you'd expect them to be in a large number of counties because they're so big to begin with. Catholics claiming 62 million adherents, Baptists about 20 million, Methodist about 10 million. Well, there is a way to correct for size. And that's what we're doing here. Yeah. Major religious groups in the United States? No, wrong one. Yeah. I'm not sure what is happening here. There's supposed to be something in here, not growth rate. Okay, I think we missed one, but it was on the number of adherents per county in every county where we're represented, and the smaller that number, the more evenly dispersed a group is in regard to its size. Here we are. And I want you to notice that Churches of Christ head the list. In relation to our size, we are the most evenly dispersed. Now, you might have heard, oh, it's terrible. A fourth of our members are in just 2 states, Texas and Tennessee. And about 5 others, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Alabama, Georgia, about the 7 largest for Churches of Christ. And you have over half of our congregations. But what you need to know is that that's true of every religious group in America. And we are more evenly dispersed, as are the disciples and the Christian churches. I think there was something about that old restoration plea that motivated our ancestors to move out to the frontier in order to preach the gospel, in order to plant churches. And would to God that it were so today. Okay, we have a bunch of things in here about growth rates. Here's one that I showed. I think the last time there was lectureship at Oklahoma Christian, I was the last speaker, and I showed this, and I've been accused of killing lectureship out there. Well, I didn't do it. They do have other programs now. But the reality is that the biggest decline in Churches of Christ has happened right here in Oklahoma. And we need to get busy and do something about that. Well, there are a lot of other statistics that I could share with you, but I noticed that when I talk statistics a lot, many people, their eyes begin to glaze over. And if you want the rest of them, get the book. It's in the book.